I welcome all the participants. I can understand that there are many new students also who may be listening this Patanjali Yoga first time, but most of them are very old students and they have studied Patanjali Yoga Sutra from a very long time, and I have to cater the needs of both the persons, both the type of persons. Therefore, I will be speaking something for new, but my major part of the lecture will be for the old students. Please be ready to listen something very new from me. Well, friends, I am now going to speak on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. You know that whenever we take the name of yoga, first name that comes in the mind is Patanjali's Yoga. It is said that Patanjali was the founder of the yoga system, although it is not correct completely. It is partially correct, because if today we are celebrating the International Yoga Day, it is only because Patanjali has written this Patanjali's Yoga Sutra or Yoga Sutra. If you would not have written this Yoga Sutra, perhaps we may not have been arranging or organizing this International Yoga Day. But along with that, it is also true that Patanjali was not the founder of the system. Patanjali was the maximum, we can say, was a systematizer of the yoga system. Whatever Patanjali had in hand, through the informations available in the Upanishads, available in the Puranas, available in other scriptures, available in the other preachers' texts and scriptures, he has used all of them and has given a very good systematic understanding and application for the sake of the practices of yoga. As well as it is also well known, and it must be known to all of you, that yoga is a system of Indian philosophy, and more than that, it is one of the 6 orthodox systems. Whenever we say that it is a philosophy, it caters to the fundamental concept of philosophy. You know that Patanjali's philosophy talks about the liberation, the pain in the world, the theory of karma, and all these things are very common in all the Indian systems. Because if we take out the concept of karma, if we take out the concept of liberation, if we take out the concept of pain that is in the form of birth and death cycle, then perhaps philosophy will be nothing in that. Patanjali also has talked on these points. But along with that, Patanjali's major contribution is not the establishment of its philosophy. Patanjali's major contribution comes to the practical aspect, that is the key point of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. First of all, we should get ourselves introduced with the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and for that, first of all, we are trying to introduce ourselves with the concept of what Patanjali means. You know that Patanjali is a word composed of 2 particular words known as Anjali and Patan. Patan means that which is falling down, and Anjali is usually when we join both the palms, both the hands together and making a pot-like form of our 2 palms, it is called Anjali. So anything falling in that Anjali is called Patanjali. It is said, how far it is true is very difficult to confirm, that Patanjali as a baby had fallen in the hands or in the Anjali of a lady who was offering water to the sun god in the river. And since the baby was fallen in that particular Anjali, his name was kept Patanjali, or he was known as Patanjali. As I have told you, he was not the originator of or founder of the system, but he was systematizer of the system, and you can imagine that this system was founded 2nd century BC. And 2nd century BC, it only stands that he was there in the world during 2200 years ago from now. More than that, Patanjali was a great scholar as well as great yoga sadhak. Great scholar, I am saying, because he was the master of philosophy, he was the master of sadhana system, he was the master of Ayurveda, he was the master of grammar. And that is the reason that it is said that Patanjali has written 3 types of books. One of the most important and very popular prayer that we usually assign to Patanjali is that Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sarirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopa Karuttam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjali Ranato. I salute to Patanjali, who has given 3 works known as Yoga, that purifies the mind, grammar, that purifies the speech, and also the book on medical science that purifies the body. So he has given the 3 books which has the fundamental purpose of purification. Purification at the level of body, purification at the level of speech, purification at the level of mind. And all these 3 are somewhere very much related to each other. How far it is true may be a matter of controversy, may be a matter of dispute, but along with that, it is true that Yoga Sutra is fundamentally a system which purifies the mind. So far as the purification is concerned, all the 3 books have common in. And from that point of view, we can say that yes, yoga is somehow related to the Patanjali Mahabhasya, or work on grammar, or the Charak Samhita, the work on medical science, because other 2 books also aim at purification of the speech or purification of the body. This book is very small book. Yoga Sutra is not a very big book. Why I am quoting it here is that Yoga Sutra, being so small, has been commented by maximum number of scholars. You can get more than 500 commentaries on Yoga Sutra, written in different languages, in different parts of the world. And even when there are so many commentaries on Yoga Sutra, today we cannot say that yes, we have understood the Yoga Sutra completely and now nothing remains that is hidden in the Yoga Sutra. Actually speaking, even today we are not sure that we have understood Yoga Sutra completely. And there is a possibility of its understanding even today. It is only because it is written in very small word sentences. And these sentences are technical words known as sutra. Sutra means a group of few words arranged in such a manner that contains maximum concept hidden in it. A very famous Sanskrit verse is there to define what is sutra: alpaksharam, asandigdham, saravat vishwatomukam, astobham, anavadyam cha, sutram sutra vido viduh. According to the notes of the sutra, the sutra composition essentially should be precise, not giving rise to any doubt, presenting a sense of many thoughts, coherent and blemishless. And we find that all these qualities of sutra have been strictly followed by Patanjali in Yoga Sutra composition. This particular book, which contains just 195 sutras, sutras are also told in English as aphorisms, just 195 aphorisms, and divided into 4 chapters. These 4 chapters are called 4 steps, pada. So Samadhi path, the first step, sadhana, vibhuti path, the 3rd step, and Kaivalya path, the 4th step. Samadhi path belongs to the 1st chapter. And in the 1st chapter, Patanjali has written 51 sutras confirming the attainment of desired immediate purpose of the practice of yoga, as well as confirms that the attainment of samadhi is the highest goal of the practice of yoga. Sadhan Path contains 55 sutras and it discusses the methods to attain the goal along with some philosophical exposition about how the method contributes towards the achievement of the goal. You know that philosophy is one of the most important aspects in any preaching, in any type of practice, in anything that you want. You know, Buddha was quite against any philosophical question. He said that there is no use of philosophical question because what is more important is to get rid of the pain that with which you are suffering now. Even if you know the philosophical questions makes no difference. So it is better that I am giving you the method through which you can remove the pain, remove the suffering, and don't get involved in the philosophical problem. But if anything has to survive for a long period of time, it must have the philosophical answer to various questions. And that is what we find also in Buddha. Buddha had to speak the philosophical problems, and he has given a lot of philosophy in his sutta. And along with that, we find also in the Patanjali that he has talked about the philosophy in this particular chapter, especially known as Sadhan Path. The third path is Vibhuti Path, which contains 55 sutras again. And these 55 sutras are giving us indication of the attainment with which one can get as a result of the practice of yoga. You know that the attainment is a result or essential result of the practice of sanjam. And sanjam is one of the highest practice in the path of samadhi. And sanjam gives us the vibhuti, that is the effect or miraculous effect of the practice. Now, we cannot say that I don't want the miraculous effect or any type of such result of our practice. These are bound to come to the practitioner. And they are coming not as a result that he wants to get it, but it is only as a result of doing sanjam on a particular object. And when one performs the sanjam on the particular object, he is bestowed with a special power. Now, these special power are not to be used, that has been said by Patanjali very clearly, but it should be taken as milestone. That you have attained this particular, you have crossed this much area or this much path, and you have still to continue for attaining the highest goal. And that is why it is said that you have to practice sanjam to come the various type of attainments, not because you want to use a materialistic purpose. It is just a confirmation that you have completed this much journey, and still this much journey is you have to complete. After that, the Kaivalya path is there, and Kaivalya is the ultimate goal. Isolation is the ultimate goal. Purusha must be separated from the Prakriti with which it is associated. And when it gets separated, it is called the highest goal, the isolation. And this isolation is the final goal, which confirms that now there is no possibility of coming again and again in this world. Now there is no possibility of undergoing any type of pain or pleasure. Now there is no possibility that he will be again involved in any type of karma or its consequences. This is what is the Kaivalya path. We are going now a little further. As I have told you, that no teaching can survive for long unless it also satisfies the philosophical aspect. And philosophical concept consists in fundamental inquiry about why there is life, what is the purpose of life, what is the goal of life. Although these are metaphysical questions, and even if it is metaphysical questions, it bothers the human mind. Human mind experiences various types of human being experiences various types of pain. Now, why this pain is coming? Why this pain has come to me? You know that we are never bothered about the pain of the world. Only when some loss occurs to me, only when some my near and dear leaves the world, only when I am having some physical problem, then at that time we are thinking, why this pain has come to me? Why I am suffering from pain? Why this has, perhaps that time I start thinking that, oh, the world is full of pain. It's not a thing that one should come in this world. It is better that not to come in this world. And then they also start thinking, Patanjali goes to the extent of saying that Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekina. Everything is pain. There is nothing that is beyond pain. But simply stating that, okay, there is pain, makes no sense unless and until a very practical guideline is given how to overcome the pain. And unless there is a confirmation that there is a possibility of overcoming the pain forever, nobody will come to yoga or nobody will go for any type of the practice. Yoga says that yes, I confirm that through the practice of yoga, you can overcome your pain forever. Try to understand. Whenever it says pain forever, it means that it has also confirmed, or it confirms or it establishes and assures the sadhaka that if you are practicing yoga, you will be never coming again in this world. You can avoid birth and death cycle forever. And this is a great assurance on the part of practitioners. And I believe that Patanjali has successfully presented this concept. Why there is pain at all? If you remember, I have said that the pain is there because of the attachment. Because of the attachment, because we are attached towards the objects of the world and we never want to be separated from that. But any object that has come into existence has to decay, has to go. And therefore, if I am born, I have to die. If anything is born, it has to decay, it has to die. From this point of view, we can say that every object has a limited life. And if I am attached to a particular object and I am not accepting that it has a limited life, undoubtedly the object has to leave me and I am going to get pain as a result of its separation. We must also know that this all attachment is because of avidya. Because of the avidya, ignorance. Because we are not knowing the true nature of the objects of the world. And ignorance causing the attachment, attachment causing the pain. So pain, attachment, ignorance has a unique cycle. If we can avoid ignorance, we can avoid attachment. If we are in attachment, we are in ignorance. So this non-attachment confirms freedom from birth and death cycle, and through it we can also transcend the feeling of pain and so also pleasure as well. Now, you know that actually speaking, Patanjali has presented the philosophy and practicals. But his practical is very different, and he has first of all tried to convince us that, see, there are three types of pain. One pain is known as klesha. And klesha is responsible for and root cause of all the pains that we are experiencing in this world. Kleshas are 5. They are known as avidya, asmita, raga, dvesh and abhinivesh. They are operative even when we leave the world. Even when we leave the world, the kleshas continue to survive, and they leave the body and go for another body. And therefore klesha is supposed to be the causal body. Because of the klesha we come again and again in this world. If we can overcome klesha, we can overcome the coming again and again in this world. So the first thing that Patanjali wanted to say, that the pain is there because of the klesha, and the klesha, the first klesha is avidya. So I have said earlier that avidya is the root cause of all sorts of pain. If we want to remove birth and death cycle, we have to remove avidya. And avidya is nothing but klesha. So if we want to remove the birth and death cycle, we have to remove the klesha in the form of avidya. Then there is the second type of pain, and it is called chitta vritti. You know that every problem in this world is because of the mind. And you also must know that what I am seeing the world, it is not that everybody is perceiving the world in the same way. On the contrary, I would like to remind you, every person has created the world in his own way. There is the world, as many types as many there are persons. It is not that what I am saying is also supported by any other person. This is true about, this can be given example through a very simple thing. You know that if I meet a person, you meet the same person, XYZ also meets the same person. And when you just collect the opinion of all the 6 persons, you will find that all have different opinions. It is only because all have seen the person from their own point of view. It is true in the life through different example as well. You know that I am father of somebody, I am son of somebody, I am husband of somebody, I am uncle of somebody, I am so many different types of my identities are there. It only suggests that the objects are in various forms, various ways, and the objects that we are seeing are not being seen in the same way by every person. And therefore, since every person is seeing the object in their own way, the mind is responsible for seeing the things. And therefore, it is the mind which is creating all sorts of problems to the people because they are seeing the objects in their own. So far as the mind is concerned, it does not work after the death, but it transmigrates. And it transmigrates and comes to the next birth when we take new birth. And the third type of pain is known as chitta vikshepa. This does not transmigrate, but its impressions are there in the chitta vrittis. And therefore we find some persons in the state of inertia, or also in the state of hyperactive. And when we find this type of people, you will also see that these 2 type of people are suffering from particular type of problems. And these particular type of problems are actually known as chitta vikshepas. They are 9 in all, and these 9 vikshepas are the root cause of all sorts of pain in this world. In order to understand this in a different way, although we do not find this concept very clearly written in Patanjali, but I try to understand it in the way of concept of 3 types of body. You know, there are 3 types of body known as the gross body, known as the causal body, and known as the subtle body. You know, we are living in this world. We are living in this world, and our body is made up of water, fire, air, ether, and earth. Along with that, because our existence is not only earth, water, fire, air, and ether, we are also having the psychological world. We are having the mind, we are having the ego, we are having the intellect. These are also the psychology. We are having the sense organs, 5 sense organs, 5 motor organs, and do not think that eyes are the sense organ, ear is the sense organ. They are only the receivers, they are not the sense organ. Sense organs are somewhere inside. So these five sense organs, five motor organs, mind, ego, intellect, all are the subtle elements, subtle body. And this subtle body remain and transmigrate. So when a person dies, it is only the gross body that remain in the world. The subtle body transmigrates. It goes to along with the causal body. No, causal body is operative even after leaving the body, because causal body is always in the need of finding a suitable home or suitable place for the rebirth. And so far as the intellect, ego, mind, all are concerned, they are only remaining associated with the causal body. Whenever causal body is successful in getting a body, the subtle body slowly passes on itself to the new body. And the new body is equipped with the sense organ, motor organ, and everything. That is why you can see that a baby, when he's born, he has not the all sense organs, or you will not be finding any indication of working of the all sense organ. But gradually as he grows, the sense organ, motor organ, everything start working in them. Now, let us try to understand it further. That what are the vrittis? What are the, how the five vrittis, or how this, you know that Patanjali, when he is talking about the vrittis, he says that mind has five functions. And these mind has five functions known as the right knowledge, wrong knowledge, imaginary knowledge, sleep, and also memory. Now, this is very interesting point, that the right knowledge is also a vritti, and it is not conducive. It means that whatever you are saying in this world, their rightness, or they are known as right knowledge only for the empirical purpose, only for the worldly purpose, not for the transcendental purpose. For the highest purpose, this knowledge that you are getting in the form of right knowledge is not considered to be right for the higher purpose. It means that this right knowledge is only having a very limited application, not universal application. We should not understand that whatever I am getting the knowledge in this world is right. Is only right for the particular purpose, for the empirical purpose, for the worldly purpose. But transcendental purpose, they are not right. They are not the final correct knowledge of objects of the world. What are the source of the right knowledge? Patanjali calls it right knowledge, but we must understand this right knowledge is not fundamentally right. Source of the right knowledge is the perception, the pratyaksha. The second source of knowledge is inference. And the third source of knowledge is agama, that is testimony. Now, whatever we see in this world through our eyes are called perception. But it is not only the eye. Whatever is viewed or whatever is seen through the eyes are called perception. Perception actually is the receiving of the knowledge through all the five sense organs. And you know that all the five sense organs receive the knowledge of their particular object. The object of ear cannot be received by the object, by the sense organ of smell. The sense of smell cannot be experienced by the sense of eyes. So it cannot be perceived. It means that every sense organ has got their very, very limited and very specific knowledge to be received by particular sense organ. And this is why these sense organs have a very close relationship with the world. Because you know that the world is made up of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And not only that, the world is made up of earth, water, fire, and ether, and our sense organs are also associated with this earth, water, fire, and ether. Earth has the fundamental quality of smell, Water has the fundamental quality of taste. Fire has the fundamental quality of vision. Air has the fundamental quality of touch. And the ether has the fundamental quality of listening, sound. And from this point of view, the particular concept of the perception confirms its correlationship with the objects of the world. And unless it is confirmed, we cannot go ahead, because if we cannot establish our relationship with the world, how can we really go for transcending the world? So this is the unique concept available in the Upanishad. Yatha pinde tatha brahmande. Whatever you are seeing in the cosmos is there in the individual body. So the body is just a miniature form of the cosmos. And that is why it is said that whatever is there outside is there inside the body. And this particular concept is supported by the concept known as pratyaksha, because whatever we are perceiving the objects that are there, which are in the form of earth, water, fire, air, and nature, and that can be received by us. That is why also it is said that human body is a perfect computer, or mind is a perfect computer. And that is why it can understand and establish a relationship with the world. Suppose if any program goes wrong, the establishment of relationship is not possible. Suppose eyes cannot see, we are deprived of many objects which is received only through eyes. If ears cannot listen, we are deprived of many such objects which is possible only through listening. Similar is the case if smell, one is not able to smell anything, get the experience of smell, he will be deprived of many objects which is known only through smell. It only suggests that all the things in the world have their correlationship with the particular type of sense organ. But along with that, as I have told you, that what you see is not that everybody is seeing the same thing. What I am seeing is not that everybody is seeing the same way, the same thing. Everybody is seeing from their own angle. Everybody is seeing the objects in their own way. And from this point of view, the world is multiplied. This is what is the pratyaksh, and everybody's pratyaksh is different. Coming to the next, that is known as inference. You know, the inference is a very, very important concept, and which depends on the pratyaksh. If you have not got the direct knowledge, the possibility of inference is not there. This possibility of inference comes only because you are having a direct knowledge of the object. Like that of, just for example, that's why the meaning of Anuman is called Anu Paschat Manam Jnanam, it is Anumanam. That knowledge which comes later. Knowledge which comes later, that what is the earlier knowledge? Earlier knowledge you have got through the perception, and then on the basis of the earlier knowledge, that is on the basis of the perception, you are inferring certain. Example, we can understand, just today, I wanted to open up my computer at 4:30 or 3:30, which is the time for my lecture, 3. Now, when I started opening at 3, I have the experience that people come when we call them. And that's why when I have opened it, I am seeing that you are all there. If I have no earlier knowledge of that whether people will be coming or not, I would not have, I thought you all there. And therefore, this particular action that I opened it would not have been fruitful. So my earlier knowledge is supporting what I am doing today. In the same way, when we are seeing cloud in the sky, when we are seeing cloud in the sky, we infer that there will be rain. No, there will be rain is depending on my earlier knowledge that I have seen. Whenever there is the cloud, whenever there is the black cloud, or during the rainy season, it rains. And on the basis of that, we infer that there is the rain because there was the cloud. So cloud and rain has got a relationship that we have seen several times. Many a time also you might have seen that whenever you are in the evening, you get ready, somebody is seeing you and says, "Oh, you are going out." Usually in the evening when we become ready, we are ready to go out. And therefore people ask, "Are you going out?" Only because it is a normal experience and inference that everyone who is getting ready in the evening goes out. So inference is a very, very, very powerful source of knowledge for everyday work. For example, a teacher comes in the class at 10 a.m. every day, and suppose I have to report to the class and I am 5 minutes late, immediately I will infer that teacher must have come to the class, because at 10 a.m. sharp he comes to the class, I am 5 minutes late. All these things come to the inference, and Patanjali says that inference is a very powerful source of knowledge. But along with that, because every knowledge is not dependent on that you have seen the object and then you are getting the knowledge. Sometimes you get the knowledge of the thing which you have not seen, and you accept what you have been reported by somebody else, and you believe in the reporting. You believe in the reporting because you believe in the authenticity of the person. If a person is not authentic, and if he speaks something you will not believe, you will not accept. So testimony is a statement given by an authentic person and considered to be a correct knowledge. You know that in India, we have a feeling that whatever is written in the Veda, is the correct knowledge. And that they must be accepted as truth. Because we cannot claim that we have to see the truth, we have to see whatever is written in the Veda, they are truth or not, and then you will believe. About Veda, nobody can have this type of question. And that's why Patanjali's concept of yoga philosophy is considered as orthodox philosophy, because they believe in the authenticity of the Vedas. And this particular form of knowledge attained through the Agam is actually supporting this concept that they believe in the Vedas. But in the normal worldly action also, you might be noticing, or you might have noticed that yes, words and they is spoken by an authentic person has a value. Suppose you are passed your 12th examination from some school and you are going to get the admission in some other school. You are required to have a testimonial from the previous school, confirming that you are holding a good moral character. If you are not having that particular testimonial with you, that you are having a good moral character, you will not be given admission in other school. This only suggests that yes, a sentence uttered by an authentic person is considered to be a valid knowledge, and that valid knowledge is supported and given good support of all the persons. That is what we are doing here, that Agam is also supposed to be a valid source of knowledge uttered by a authentic person or given written in the Vedic literature. This is my contention was that Viparya is the wrong knowledge. You know that Viparya is the wrong knowledge only when it is said that, or when you are shown that it is wrong. Till you are getting the knowledge by seeing the object, how can you say that it is a Viparya? Suppose, for example, you are seeing a rope and confused and saying that, oh, it is a snake. Now, till you are seeing the snake in a rope, though it is wrong knowledge, but till you are seeing the snake in the rope, it is the right knowledge. I believe that Viparya should not be understood as a valid source of knowledge, because Viparya by itself, till it is not contradicted, it is right knowledge. So when Viparya is removed, then it becomes Viparya. When your misunderstanding of rope as a snake, when it is removed, then it can be said it is Viparya. Till then, it cannot be called a Viparya. I believe Patanjali has mentioned this Viparya as one of the most important aspects of Klesha. And when Patanjali says Viparya, he wanted to correlate it with the concept of avidya. And that's why avidya has been defined by Patanjali like Viparya. He says that when you are unable to see the truth as it is, and it projects in a different way or different object, it is called Viparya, it is called avidya. When we are not able to see the transitoriness of the object and consider it to be permanent, or when we are not understanding that what is pure and we consider impure to be pure, that which is not soul, we consider it to have soul. All these are the concept of Viparya. And that's why that while describing about the Viparya, the commentator of Patanjali has said there are 5 types of Viparya. These 5 types of Viparya means 5 types of avidya. Avidya, Asmita, Rag, Dvesh, and Avidya. So I believe that Viparya is not exactly the mental modification. Viparya is actually the root cause of our involvement in the world. We are unable to see the truth. Then comes the Vikalpa. Vikalpa is having a very unique anything that we are seeing exists only in the words, but they have no real existence. It is something that you might have heard about the utopia. Castles in the air. Now, castles in the air is only a word. They do not really exist. They can't exist at all. So when an object cannot exist or has no possibility of existence in any time, and they have spoken through the words, these words are only the Vikalpas. Even there are many explanations and many such descriptions given by poets. And these poets, what they speak are nothing but only the expressions in the words, which has nothing to do with the reality. Oh, if you say I can bring the stars plucking from the sky, can it be possible? No. But they write all these things. They are right because they are not possible. They are only saying through the words, and actually they are not existing. So Patanjali says that Vikalpa is another very important, because when we are seeing the object, when we are reading the object, we create a different type of images in our own mind. And when we create the images in our own mind, these images are something as if they are really existing. You know, this is what is, this particular Vikalpa is a type of disease who are said to be daydreamers. These daydreamers are also Vikalpas. They live in Vikalpas. They live in their own imaginations, and every imagination they create have no reality, and they are only the creation in the mind. After this Vikalpa, there is the 4th type. And 4th type is type of sleep. It is very, very controversial. Controversy because people are thinking that sleep has dream or not. It's a matter of controversy. People think that sleep usually has no dream, especially on the basis of Patanjali, because Patanjali says, Abhava pratyalambana vrittir nidra. You can see the sutra on Nidra. Nidra is a sleep, a type of sleep which has no content. Nidra has no content, and therefore the contentless sleep is called sleep Nidra. I believe that it is not an acceptable thing. I think that there is a dream in the sleep. It is maybe possible that I do not remember the dream what we have dreamt in the night during my sleep. But it is also true, we are dreaming. This is supported by Patanjali. So it is very difficult to say that why Patanjali is saying that there is no experience in the Nidra, whereas in the Sutra in connection with the Chitta Prasadan, he writes Swapna Nidra Jnana Lambanam Va. The Swapna, that is the dream that you experiences in the sleep, and the knowledge attained thereof is the method through which one can become or one can pacify his mind. If this is the case, then why Patanjali has said that there is no content in the Nidra? If there is no content, the possibility of Sutra is totally defeated. So we must accept that there is no abhava. It is a type of abhava very different than usual understanding. You know that Praman is a particular type of knowledge whereas the object is there and supporting document is there. Supporting statement is there. Viparya also is the same thing. Only thing is that we are unable to see the truth. But the statement is there, object is there. So far as Vikalp is concerned, Vikalp is a special type of knowledge or experience which contains only the statement but no existence of any object or related object. So there is only the object, only this description but no object. So you can imagine very immediately the difference. The Pramana and Viparya are the two things, two types of knowledge which has a statement and object, existence of both. In the Vikalp, there is only the statement but no existence of object. But in Nidra, there is neither the statement nor the object. And we are in the sleep, and you sleep and you create your own world. And whatever you are seeing in the dream, that does not exist neither in the form of a statement of anybody nor it exists anywhere. Nidra is that where there is absence of any experience. Well, on the basis of this, people have calculated or concluded that Nidra is a vritti where there is no content, and no content means there is no dream. But it is also a very dispute on the basis of two things. Actually speaking, Patanjali himself writes in the context of Chitta Prasadam that Swapna Nidra Jnana Lambanamba, the knowledge that is achieved or attained during the sleep in the form of dream. No, how can he write in the form of dream during the sleep if the sleep is without any dream? And therefore I do not agree that Patanjali doesn't want to say that Nidra has no dream. Only abhav that can mean here that I wanted to share with all of you is that if you analyze the Pratyaksh and Anuma, so the Praman and Viparya, these two Praman and Viparya are such knowledge which are documented, they were well stated, we find the statement regarding the object and the object also exists. So there is the existence of a statement and the object correlating with each other. That means that object is there and object has been defined and this defined object is also available. In Viparya also we have the same thing, only thing is that we have the inability to see the object in the form and therefore we are unable to see it. That is why the Viparya, but it does not mean that object is not existing. So statement and object both are existing. In Vikalp you might have seen that there is only the statement. There is absence of object. So Vikalp is such a knowledge where is only the statement is there where there is no object existing. And when Nidra is there, when he says Abhava Pratyalamana Vritti Nidra, Abhava means here where there is no statement, where there is no object also, yet one gets experience during the sleep is called Nidra. It means that when you are dreaming, the dream content is not explained anywhere. The dream content is not existing anywhere in truth. So when there is neither the statement of the dream that you have seen is available, nor the object that you have seen in the dream is available, there is the absence of content, there is the absence of as well as the object both, it is called Nidra. So when you are dreaming, the dream is a creation of your own mind, and that you create just in the sleep. But when you get up, mostly it happens that for certain period of time you remember, most of the time you forget as soon as you get up. The knowledge that you attain during the sleep in the dream, it only confirms that there is a dream which can give you a particular type of knowledge which can work for the sake of the pacification of mind. Just as this is what there everywhere, and it is said that about the Harishchandra. Harishchandra had dreamt that he has donated all his kingdom to a particular Brahmin, and that Brahmin came and he claimed all the. So dream is there. So I do not accept this concept that the sleep is always without the dream. Sleep has also the dream. Only thing is that it is mostly related with non-existent of the word or non-existent of the object itself. This is what I want. So far as the concept of Smriti is concerned, I will be talking on this in my next lecture. Thank you.